The last thing my sister said before slamming the door in my face was, "You've never done a single thing for me." My parents stood behind her and nodded as if those words were true. Then I looked my sister in the eyes and quietly said 5 words that neither of them had heard in over 20 years. Her face turned white before she collapsed into tears. "My name is Sarah. I'm 35 years old, and for most of my life, I accepted being invisible to the people I loved the most. But there comes a point when even the quietest daughter refuses to let history be rewritten. Growing up, my younger sister Emma was the center of my parents' universe. If Emma won a spelling bee, the whole family celebrated. If I earned straight A's, Dad would simply say, "Keep it up." When Emma forgot her homework, Mom drove across town to deliver it. When I forgot mine, I was told, "You'll learn responsibility." It wasn't cruelty in obvious ways. It was 1,000 tiny moments reminding me I always came second. Still, I loved my sister. She followed me everywhere. She copied my hairstyle, borrowed my clothes, and climbed into my bed whenever thunderstorms frightened her. I never blamed her for being the favorite. She was only a child. Then came the night that changed everything. I was 13. Emma had just turned 8. A faulty heater started a fire in our old farmhouse shortly after midnight. Smoke filled the hallway before anyone realized what was happening. Dad shouted from downstairs, "Everybody out!" Mom grabbed my little brother. Dad ran toward the back door. I reached the front porch. Then I heard Emma screaming upstairs. Everyone froze. The staircase was already burning. Dad tried to climb back up, but flames forced him back. Mom was hysterical. "My baby." Without thinking, I wrapped a wet towel around my face and ran inside. People later called it brave. I called it instinct. Emma was trapped in her bedroom, crying beside the window. I grabbed her hand. "Don't let go." The hallway was filled with smoke. I could barely breathe. Part of the ceiling collapsed behind us. I carried her down the stairs just before the living room erupted in flames. The firefighters reached us seconds later. I spent weeks in the hospital recovering from burns on my arms and back. Emma recovered without a scratch. Everyone called it a miracle. Dad hugged me once. "I'm proud of you." It was the first and last time I ever heard those words from him. As years passed, nobody talked about the fire anymore. The scars stayed on my body. The memories stayed in my mind. Life moved on. Or so I thought. 22 years later, our parents decided to retire. They announced they were selling the family home. At dinner, Dad smiled. "We've decided to help Emma buy her dream house." I smiled politely. "That's wonderful." Then Mom added, "We're giving her almost all the money." I blinked. "What?" Dad looked uncomfortable. "You've always been independent." I laughed quietly. "So because I worked hard, I get nothing?" Mom sighed. "You don't need it." Emma remained completely silent. That hurt the most. A week later, I learned something even worse. Mom had also given Emma Grandma's wedding ring. The ring Grandma had promised me before she passed away. When I confronted Mom, she shrugged. Emma admired it more. I couldn't believe it. For the first time in years, resentment began replacing forgiveness. Then came Emma's engagement party. Nearly the entire family attended. Toward the end of the evening, Emma stood to thank everyone. I couldn't have achieved any of this without Mom and Dad. Everyone applauded. She continued. "They've always supported me." More applause. Then she looked directly at me. "I hope one day Sarah stops acting like life owes her something." The room became painfully quiet. She smiled. "She's always thought she sacrificed more than everyone else." I stared at her. She laughed. "But honestly," she shrugged, "she's never really done anything for me." Several cousins looked awkward. Dad didn't say a word. Mom nodded slightly. Something inside me finally broke. I quietly left. The next morning, I received a message from Emma. Stop making everything about yourself. I didn't reply. Instead, I drove to the old storage unit where Dad had kept boxes from the fire. I wasn't looking for revenge. I was looking for closure. While sorting through burned photographs and damaged albums, I found an old cassette tape labeled simply, Fire Department Interview. Curious, I borrowed an old player from a neighbor. The recording crackled to life. A firefighter interviewed my parents only hours after the fire. Then I heard something unexpected. The firefighter asked, "Who rescued the little girl?" Dad answered, "Our neighbor got her out." I froze. What? The firefighter sounded confused. "I thought your older daughter carried her outside." Several seconds of silence followed. Then Mom quietly said, "We don't want Sarah thinking she's responsible for Emma forever." The recording ended. I stared at the tape for nearly an hour. They had intentionally erased what happened. Not only from other people. From Emma. She had grown up believing someone else had saved her. My hand shook. Everything suddenly made sense. She genuinely didn't know. I cried harder than I had in years. Then I made a decision. I wasn't going to expose them online. I wasn't going to scream. I simply wanted the truth told once. Our parents' 50th anniversary arrived 2 weeks later. The entire extended family gathered. After dinner, Dad stood proudly to give a speech. Halfway through, I politely raised my hand. "I'd like to share something too." Dad looked uneasy. I connected the old cassette player to the speakers. The room filled with static. Then the recording played. Every word echoed through the room. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. Emma stared at our parents. Completely confused. When the recording ended, she whispered, "What does this mean?" I looked directly into her eyes. Then I quietly said 5 words. "I carried you through fire." The room fell completely silent. Emma's face lost all color. She looked at my scarred arms. For the first time in decades. She really saw them. "No," she whispered. Mom started crying. Dad buried his face in his hands. Emma slowly walked toward me. "You." Her voice shook. "You saved me?" I nodded. She looked back at our parents. "You told me." Mom couldn't speak. Dad finally admitted the truth. "We thought forgetting would protect both of you." Emma screamed. "It protected yourselves." She turned toward me with tears streaming down her face. "I spent my whole life believing you'd done nothing for me." She collapsed into my arms sobbing. "I'm so sorry." I hugged her. For the first time since we were children. But the biggest surprise came moments later. Our Uncle Robert stood. I'd been quiet for 20 years. Everyone looked at him. I was one of the firefighters that night. My heart skipped. "I heard your father lie." He looked directly at Dad. I should have corrected him. He wiped away tears. I've regretted that silence every single day. Dad couldn't look at anyone. Emma removed Grandma's wedding ring from her finger. She gently placed it into my hand. "It was always yours." I tried refusing. She closed my fingers around it. "No." She smiled sadly. "It belongs to the sister who gave me my life." Then she handed Dad the check he'd given her toward the house. "I don't want money built on lies." Mom cried uncontrollably. "I never meant for this." Emma answered quietly. "Intentions don't erase choices." Over the following months, everything changed. Dad entered therapy for the guilt he'd buried for decades. Mom apologized more times than I could count. Some wounds healed. Others left permanent scars. Just like the ones on my arms. Emma postponed her wedding for 6 months. Not because of the drama. Because she wanted to rebuild our relationship first. We started meeting every Saturday for coffee. Sometimes we'd laugh. Sometimes we'd cry. Sometimes we'd simply sit together in silence. One afternoon, she looked at my scars again. I used to wonder why you never wore short sleeves. I smiled gently. I stopped hiding them. She reached across the table and held my hand. You shouldn't. Last spring, Emma gave birth to a beautiful little girl. When she introduced me to her daughter, she whispered something I'll never forget. This is your Aunt Sarah. She smiled through tears. The bravest person you'll ever meet. I laughed and shook my head. No. Emma squeezed my hand. You're wrong. She looked at her sleeping baby. If someone ever carried my daughter through fire. Her voice cracked. I'd spend every day making sure she never forgot. And in that moment, I realized something. The 5 words that reminded my sister who I really was didn't just bring back her memory. They gave me back the family I thought I'd lost forever.